Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and how it affects our human rights. Welcome to the show, and thank you for listening to Policy and Rights. My name is Michael Clogs. I am your host, and okay, so we have the vaccine. There's let's face it, at this point there's massive amounts of vaccine being circulated out there. There are many companies out there manufacturing I should say there are a few companies out there manufacturing vaccines. There are many distribution points out there, whether it's COVAX, or which is organized by the WHO, or leading down to different governments. Here in North America, of course, the Canadian federal government is in control of distribution of the vaccines. The FDA is in charge of approving those vaccines so that different manufacturers can actually distribute the vaccine. The need for the vaccine is not in question. You may question if it's safe. That's your right. You may argue that it's safe. That, again, is your right. But either way, the medication is needed. It is needed to help lives move past the pandemic. It is going to be needed for a very long time, this vaccine. It would not be surprised to find out that it's going to be like the flu vaccine. That's something that we're going to have to do once or twice a year to not just end the pandemic, because if we look at 1918 with the Spanish flu, and when we were able to really develop vaccines and help our immune system develop the right antibodies and everything so that we don't get sick, that flu vaccine has been around as long as I can remember, that we've needed to get an annual flu shot. So along with the annual flu shot, we may be looking to get the annual COVID shot. It is how this could land in order to keep the pandemic from reoccurring after we squashed it. But none of that really is that much of in question. What is in question right now is, should the pharmaceutical companies be allowed to make a runaway profit from off of something that the entire world needs? The question would be, are the pharmaceutical companies holding us hostage so that they can make a massive profit? Or should they be the intellectual property and the patents that go along with building this vaccine be shared freely around the world so that we can get 7.5 billion people vaccinated against COVID-19? Our first argument is actually going to come from the WHO. Let's hear what Dr. Tedros had to say the other day in a press release on May 7th, and in which case will be talking about solidarity and the vaccines. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Hello and good day to wherever you are listening to us today. It is Friday, 7 May 2021. My name is Christian Littmeier and I'm welcoming you to today's Global COVID-19 press conference with a focus on the new WHO Council on the Economics of Health for All. For this, we have a very special guest today. I'm happy to welcome Professor Mariana Mazzucato, the chair of the WHO Council on the Economics for Health for All, and professor in the Economics of Innovation and Public Value at the University College in London, and founding director of the UCL. Welcome. We have also a very special situation today because many of you have been waiting for the outcome of the TAG EUL and the SAGE deliberations. So we have guests for this too. We have the chair of the TAG, Professor Arnaud Didier-Laurent, with us, and Professor Alejandro Cravioto, the chair of the SAGE, for any further discussions later. But first, of course, here in the room, we have Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, WHO Director General, Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of WHO's Health Emergencies Program, Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove, Technical Lead on COVID-19, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist, Dr. Miangelo Simao, Assistant Director General for Access to Medicines and Health Products, and Dr. Bruce Aylward, Special Advisor to the Director General and the lead on the ACT Accelerator. Now, let me hand over to the Director General for the opening remarks. Dr. Tedros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wednesday's announcement by the United States of America that it will support a temporary waiver of intellectual property protections for COVID-19 vaccines is a significant statement of solidarity and support for vaccine equity. I know that this is not a politically easy thing to do. So I very much appreciate the leadership of the United States, and we urge other countries to follow their example. I also want to emphasize that WHO values the incredible contribution of the private sector to the pandemic and to health in general. We would not have the vaccines, medicines, diagnostics, and devices that save lives and improve well-being around the world if it were not for the innovation of the private sector. WHO supports companies making a fair return on their investment in research and development for investment in further innovation. We are in an unprecedented crisis that requires unprecedented action. Cases are at a record high. Almost 100,000 people are dying globally each week. And we have a chronic vaccine crisis. The World Trade Organization provisions for IP waivers were designed precisely for a situation like this. If we don't use them now, then when? It's also important to remember that intellectual property waivers will need to be accompanied by transfer of technology and know-how for this difficult-to-make vaccines. We continue to encourage all member states to support technology transfers through CTAP, the COVID-19 Technology Access Pool. We encourage governments to offer incentives to manufacturers to share technology and know-how. And we encourage countries with the most vaccines to donate doses through COVAX, which is the fastest and most equitable way to increase the distribution of vaccines globally. Just as it takes a comprehensive approach of public health measures to defeat COVID-19, so solving the vaccine crisis requires that we pull out all the stops. WHO is continuing to explore every avenue for increasing access to vaccines globally. This afternoon, WHO gave emergency use listing to Sinopharm Beijing's COVID-19 vaccine, making it the sixth vaccine to receive WHO validation for safety, efficacy, and quality. This expands the list of vaccines that COVAX can buy and gives countries confidence to expedite their own regulatory approval and to import and administer a vaccine. The Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization, or SAGE, has also reviewed the available data and recommends the vaccine for adults 18 years and older with a 2-dose schedule. Vaccines remain a vital tool. But right now, the volume and distribution of vaccines is insufficient to end the pandemic. Without the sustained and tailored application of public health measures that we know work. The COVID-19 pandemic is a vivid demonstration that health crisis is not just a health crisis. It can have dramatic consequences for livelihoods, businesses, and economies. The pandemic has shown that when health is at risk, everything is at risk. But when health is protected and promoted, individuals, families, communities, economies, and nations can thrive. That's why universal health coverage is WHO's top priority. All roads should lead to universal health coverage. I repeat, all roads should lead to universal health coverage. But globally, we're going in the wrong direction. Around the world, more households are spending an increasing proportion of their income on health. And more people are being exposed to poverty as a result of out-of-pocket health spending. It's clear that making progress toward this universal health coverage cannot just be a matter for ministries of health, but takes an all-of-government approach with leadership from the highest political levels and close engagement with ministries of finance. As we recover and rebuild, we have a unique moment to mobilize investments for healthier, more resilient, more productive, and more sustainable societies. We need a new narrative that makes health for all the central goal of public policies on innovation, industry, employment, environment, and more. That's why we have established a new WHO Council on the Economics of Health for All to identify new ways to shape the global economy and to build societies that are healthy, inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. The Council comprises 11 distinguished experts in economics, health, government, finance, and development from around the world, and is chaired by Professor Mariana Mazzucato, the professor of the Economics of Innovation and Public Value, and founding director of the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose at University College London. Professor Mazzucato, thank you for your leadership of this new council, and thank you for joining us today, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. I cannot tell you what an honor it's been also talking to you in the last months about this council, and it was so wonderful yesterday when we met for the first time with the 11 women. And as you and I have said, when people ask us why only women, we will say why not. So I'm already preempting one of the questions. The mission of the council is to provide a new approach to shape the economy with the objective of building healthy societies that are just, inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. And fundamentally, what we want to do is reverse the usual logic. So what's the usual logic? The usual logic says invest in health because it's good for the economy. And we also find relationships between health and economic growth. We want to be much more bold and provocative than that. We want to say, focus on the goal. The goal is health for all. And for all the reasons that Dr. Tedros just explained, why that's crucial. And then we backtrack and understand how to restructure the economy. What does that mean? New financing tools, new types of public-private relationships. The private sector, of course, is important. So crowding in the private sector in fundamental areas that are critical for health for all. New ways to think about the debt and the deficit, so we're not always, asking very siloed questions, but also new ways to structure our budgets. So outcomes-based budgeting, outcomes being health for all. So we really want to unpick the economy, our economic structures, in order to deliver on that goal. And to do that, I think the really important point that Dr. Tedros mentioned is the narrative. Where does innovation come from? Where do healthy societies come from? To do that, we really need to unpick the notions of value and of wealth and innovation, which again have often been very siloed. There's going to be 4 major areas of work, and maybe I'll just touch on them very quickly. One is on measurement. How do we actually value and measure health for all? And that means both within organizations, but also, of course, with GDP metrics, which we all know are limited. But unfortunately, we have not succeeded in really replacing the kind of, static notions of, say, cost-benefit analysis and net present value as, again, kind of static ways to actually measure the value that, for example, ambitious policies can deliver. We want to focus on capacity on the ground, which we've, of course, with COVID-19 seen has really been missing in so many different countries. So what is the capacity within the public sector that's required in order also to collaborate with the private sector on all sorts of different areas? And unfortunately, as we have been under-financing, under-resourcing, but also under-imagining the role that the public sector can play, we want to really focus a lot on that. Third, finance, so the actual investment that's required in health for all, and that has 2 sides, both the financing, literally new financing tools, including how to redesign particular institutions like development banks to really also focus on health for all, but also the kind of macroeconomic finance, again, coming back to these issues of deficits, debts, and outcomes-based budgeting. And finally, innovation, which is so central to the topic this week and last week around the big news from the Biden administration in terms of how do we actually govern innovation, including not only intellectual property rights, towards areas that we're sure will actually benefit people, right? So innovation for the common interest. And of course, we need to be incentivizing innovation and think of all sorts of issues that are critical for the private sector, but really this is about nurturing collective intelligence. The private sector is very important, but so is the public sector in innovation. In the U.S., where Biden is leading the country, the public sector puts $40 billion a year in health innovation. So they are also creating value, co-creating value. So how can we actually govern that collective creation of innovation in such a way that people actually benefit? So these are the 4 areas, and I think I've spoken enough, so I'm happy to pass back to Dr. Tedros and happy to also answer any questions later.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Thank you, Professor Mazzucato. And I very much look forward to the Council's work in the months and years ahead, and look forward to working with you very closely. And thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you.
Finally, Wednesday marked the International Day of the Midwife. To mark the day, WHO, the UN Population Fund, the International Confederation of Midwives, and other partners published the 2021 State of the World's Midwifery Report, which shows that the world currently faces a shortage of 900,000 midwives. Fully investing in midwives by 2035 would avert roughly 2/3 of maternal and newborn deaths and stillbirths, saving 4.3 million lives per year. Midwives are not a cost. They're an investment in a healthier, safer, fairer future for all of us. Christian?
We heard some pretty important things there. New ways of looking at healthcare that would be provided for everyone, not just a few. A new economic way of seeing how we should be investing into healthcare, and a new council, which, as she said, why not women? A council of 11 women to change how the world sees healthcare and change how we view the profit and loss way of distributing medicine and vital, life-giving healthcare services. So, as we know, we did hear President Joe Biden. He made a comment about wanting to limit profits for the pharmaceutical companies with COVID-19, and that comes with suspension of intellectual properties, the World Trade Organization coming on board with a suspension or a waiver of those intellectual property rights so that other countries can manufacture and distribute around their country the COVID-19 vaccine. With that came another question of, what about the raw materials? Yes, the technology and the formulation will be shared, but what about the raw materials? What if a country it's hard for them to get that raw material needed to be able to make the vaccine possible in their country? What should be done about that? What should be done about the waivers? There's a lot of questions out there. To bring this to Canada, there is a group of MPs that they want to suspend the patents on the COVID-19 vaccine. So let's listen to what they have to say. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
My name is Don Davies. I'm the Member of Parliament for Vancouver Kingsway and a New Democrat critic for health. I'm extremely pleased to be joined today by my colleagues Marcus Pulowski, who sits on the Standing Committee on Health and represents Thunder Bay Rainy River, Luc Thériault, who is the critic for health for the Bloc Québécois and represents the good people of Montcalm, and Elizabeth May, who represents Sandwich Gulf Islands and is the parliamentary leader of the Green Party of Canada. Now, those of you who have spent time on the Hill may appreciate the unusual nature of this news conference. It is relatively rare to see MPs from all parties, virtually all parties, coming together in common cause in pan-partisan agreement. And I think that reflects the extraordinary times that we find ourselves in, and it also reflects the extraordinary cooperation that I think is required and recognized by people all over the world. I'm going to pause and say that, as my remarks will show, the Conservative Party is also in agreement with the thrust of what we will say today, and we're invited to this conference, but I think for logistics reasons, we're unable to send someone. We're here today to join voices in common cause to call on the Canadian government to immediately support the call of dozens of countries around the world upon the World Trade Organization to waive trade rules on intellectual property that are working to prevent countries from producing COVID vaccines who have the ability to do so. This morning's news conference follows a letter myself and a number of my colleagues here today and in other parties have drafted collectively that has now been signed by over 70 members of Parliament, remarkably from every party represented in Parliament. We know this. We know that the SARS-CoV-2 virus knows no borders. It can spread easily, and it is a global problem. We know that it mutates, and that the longer we take to vaccinate everyone on Earth, the more vulnerable everyone is to new variants. As has been said repeatedly, no one is safe until everyone is safe. I listened to Peter Singer, who's an advisor to the World Health Organization yesterday, describe the situation in, I think, a very powerful way. He said it's like there's 1 million bonfires all over the globe, and the embers of those fires are spreading everywhere. There is a profound issue of equity. We believe that all humans have a right to be protected, whether they live in poor, developing, or developed countries alike. We know that the TRIPS rules, that's the trade-related intellectual property rules, that we are asking to be temporarily waived to allow countries to manufacture vaccines, have been developed for normative times and to protect the legitimate intellectual property rights. That is not the case today with the COVID vaccines. We are not talking about running shoes or farm equipment. We are talking about a global health crisis, a planetary pandemic that puts all of us at risk. Most of the investment that went into the research and development of COVID vaccines was publicly funded. The normal case for an individual patent holder seeking protection because they risked their own capital and resources does not apply in these circumstances. Finally, we believe it is in our world's interest to vaccinate as many people as fast as possible. So any barrier anywhere, such as the TRIPS rules, that works against this must be removed. Prime Minister Trudeau has, we think, correctly stated from the beginning of this pandemic that we need a Team Canada approach. This is true, but it is not enough. We also believe we need a Team World approach. So today, parliamentarians are putting down our partisan shields. We are coming together to join common cause to call on this government to immediately follow the lead of U.S. President Joe Biden. We cannot put the profits of a handful of pharmaceutical companies over the public health interests of the global population. Every day that we wait, humans get infected. Every day we wait, humans die. And so we're calling on the Canadian government to immediately add its voice to all of those calling for a removal of the TRIPS barriers temporarily to allow every country anywhere who has the ability to produce COVID vaccines to protect global health. Thank you. I will now turn the microphone over to my great colleague, Marcus Pawlowski.
Thank you very much, Don. Je vais parler en anglais, mais avant ça, je vais dire remercier pour tous nos collègues de Québec qui ont signé cette lettre-là. Alors, thank you very much, Don, for doing this. As a doctor who's worked a lot of years in developing countries for poor people, I certainly appreciate the importance of this and also the political significance of the fact that we have people from all parties joined together to do this. I also want to thank someone who's not here, and that's Nathaniel Erskine Smith. I feel a little bit guilty about that because Nate has contributed at least as much to this as I have. We all agreed, though, that we would only have one person per party, and Nate graciously suggested that it be me. Thanks to you, Nate, for that. Too bad for the press because I think Nate's a better speaker than I am. Now, we actually started this letter and distributing this letter before the Biden announcement, the great Biden announcement, and we were caught a little surprised by the fact that the Americans beat us to it. Now, like most Canadians, I don't really like it when the Americans beat us at anything, but I think in this instance, I'm actually pretty happy that they beat us to it. I'd like to thank the MPs from all parties who've signed this letter. I think there were others who may have liked to have signed, but for one reason or another didn't. I think it's still open to signatories. I think it's really great to see so many MPs willing to put their compassion for others above partisan politics. And I think that's really what's happened with this letter. The pandemic ought to be something that brings humanity collectively together. It doesn't matter whether you're a poor person living in the slums of Mumbai or Soweto or Mexico City, or you're a rich business executive working on Wall Street or Bay Street. The pandemic basically put us all in the same shoes. We were all faced with the same kind of problems, the same worries, worried about our jobs, having to live apart from our families and friends, worried about our health or the health of people in our families. Now, has the pandemic actually brought the world closer together? So far, it doesn't seem like it. Unlike World War II, where the shared suffering led to the UN Charter and the international global legal order, what in terms of improved international cooperation has come out of COVID? So far, it doesn't seem very much. In fact, it seems actually the opposite. The world has kind of been pushed apart by COVID. Borders have been closed. We've seen vaccine nationalism. We've seen global supply chains becoming domestic. And I think it's basically been a matter of every country for itself in fighting the pandemic. And of course, also in Parliament, we've seen the same fighting as always. Partly that's natural, and it's partly because it's the job of the opposition to criticize our government. We pay them the big bucks to criticize our government. But maybe also it's because, to some extent, they don't actually like our government either. But with this letter, I think we see MPs from all parties rising above that, working together. And I don't think it's just us. There are over 100 different countries which support the waiver. The Biden administration supports the waiver. In a recent similar letter, almost 400 EU parliamentarians signed a letter. And I just looked online. There was something about a similar letter signed by 100 members of parliament in England asking for the same thing. I absolutely believe in the value of patent protection. It's a good thing. It helps in general our society. And I think we also have to collectively give a big debt of gratitude to the vaccine producers who really were some of the heroes in this pandemic. Now, they're going to make their money one way or the other. But I think that the waiver is absolutely the right thing to do, because absolutely nothing should stand in our collective goal of humanity, which is ending this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus. Monsieur Thériault, allez ici, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Don. Alors, d'entrée de jeu, je voudrais dire que tout le caucus du Bloc est unanime derrière la démarche de ce matin et la lettre. Vous savez, une épidémie, on peut y faire face localement ou nationalement, mais la COVID-19, c'est pas une épidémie, c'est une pandémie. Alors, soit on s'y attaque de façon planétaire, soit on n'en viendra jamais à bout. À titre d'exemple, si on pense à nos frères et sœurs haïtiens, au moment où on se parle, Haïti n'a reçu aucune dose pour protéger sa population. Aucune. On ne peut pas s'empêcher de craindre qu'émerge un variant haïtien. Des exemples là, comme ça, là, ça se compte par dizaines. On voit ce qui se passe en Inde, on voit ce qui se passe au Brésil, où une forte concentration de gens infectés et non vaccinés a entraîné une mutation du virus et un nouveau variant. S'il faut que nos vaccins soient impuissants contre un éventuel nouveau variant, ben on va revenir à la case départ. Alors l'appel qu'on lance aujourd'hui, c'est plus qu'un appel à la solidarité, c'est une mesure de santé publique pour protéger nos populations. Au moment où on se parle, l'initiative COVAX a distribué 53 millions de doses dans 121 pays. C'est mieux que rien, mais c'est très peu quand on sait qu'il y a 8 milliards d'humains sur Terre. Actuellement, là, tous les pays du monde sont en concurrence pour obtenir les vaccins qui sortent d'un nombre trop limité d'usines. Les pays qui ont le moyen de se payer le vaccin se servent en premier et les autres sont derrière la file, avec le risque d'un nouveau variant qui s'y développe. Alors, il y a des usines de fabrication de vaccins qui auraient la capacité de produire, mais qui ne peuvent pas le faire parce qu'elles ne détiennent pas les brevets ou les licences. En Inde, en Afrique du Sud, au Brésil, par exemple. Alors, l'accord sur les droits de propriété intellectuelle qui touche au commerce, conclu là, à l'OMC, a justement été conçu pour une telle situation. Conclu, rappelons-nous que lors de la crise du sida, là, qui faisait rage dans le continent africain, cet accord permet de lever temporairement la protection des vaccins, des brevets, pour permettre aux pays en développement de faire face à une crise de santé publique. Cet accord contient des mécanismes de contrôle pour éviter que ces médicaments ne reviennent pour être vendus dans les pays riches. Ça vient protéger l'essentiel du marché des entreprises pharmaceutiques. Alors, quand les pharmaceutiques font valoir leurs droits exclusifs pour s'opposer à cette levée partielle des brevets, ben, elles oublient que les gouvernements ont investi des milliards pour les aider à développer les vaccins. Et même si plusieurs détenteurs de brevets sont des entreprises américaines, le gouvernement Biden appuie leur levée. Et hier, l'Assemblée nationale du Québec a été unanime pour adopter une motion présentée par des députés de tous les partis. Et je cite, que l'Assemblée nationale salue et appuie la décision du président des États-Unis d'appuyer la résolution présentée à l'Organisation mondiale du commerce visant à suspendre les brevets des vaccins contre la COVID-19. Fin de la citation. Alors aujourd'hui, nous demandons simplement au gouvernement du Canada d'en faire autant. Merci.
Merci, Luc. And finally, but not least, May, the floor is yours.
Merci, Don, et merci à tous mes collègues. Merci à Luc pour votre caucus. Je suis tellement heureux de reconnaître que votre caucus, comme nous, comme Verts, nous sommes unanimes dans cette position que c'est absolument essentiel pour l'humanité, pour la santé de l'humanité, d'avoir un changement dans le règlement de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce. As Greens, we are also united and so grateful for the non-partisan spirit that so many members of Parliament have signed this letter. I go back to the origins of the TRIPS agreement. It was part of the Uruguay round. I've often commented that if we cared as a community of nations as much about climate as we care about protecting intellectual property, we would have treaties that actually worked. TRIPS agreement is very forceful, and an exemption in this case is well required for the health of all. It's a matter, as Donna said, it's fairness. It's also so very, very within reach that we have, having had billions and billions of dollars of public funds go to the innovators and the pharmaceutical companies. And yes, thank you to the creative scientific minds that developed the vaccines. But it's not possible to believe that we would fail to temporarily suspend TRIPS rules so that countries around the world can manufacture the vaccines themselves. It's astonishing to me that the President of the United States, usually a government that is a champion of the hegemony of things like TRIPS rules, would be ahead of us. We note, and I note, that when asking Minister of Health Patty Hajdu about this the other night in our emergency debate on the COVID crisis in Alberta, that was when I realized, of course, it's not Patty Hajdu that decides, it's Mary Ng, it's the Trade Department people, and we're dragging our feet. And so doing this together, as we're doing it, I hope that within hours, the Canadian government will agree that it's time to suspend TRIPS rules temporarily in light of this pandemic crisis. Merci.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now we'll turn it over to any media for questions.
If you have a question, please.
Okay, so there it is. That it would seem that all the parties in Canada are in agreement that the TRIPS rules should be suspended in order to ensure that all countries will be able to have the COVID vaccine. And like I said, they said, Elizabeth May said that it's kind of interesting that the American government jumped on board with this, and they may be able to be the one country to spearhead it, because so many of the pharmaceutical companies have a base or research base in the United States. So, why should we be looking to suspend or have the pharmaceuticals do work for government, or have a healthcare system that is based in the public sector, so that it can be shared and limit the amount of profit? When we look at something a little maybe less obvious, like mental health, this is what happens when we have a tech company help a provincial program so that it can reach more people across British Columbia. The Minister of Mental Health made an announcement about a Foundry app that will help the young people find better mental health and maybe help end addiction in our youth, or limit addiction in our youth, and limit the number of overdoses. Especially, this announcement or launch comes on the heels of a 12-year-old who overdosed on opiates. So let's listen to that. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
I'm joining you from the territory of the Algonquin-speaking people, the territory of the First Nation, of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I'm Sheila Malcolmson, British Columbia's Minister for Mental Health and Addictions. Before anything, I want to speak to the tragic loss of a 12-year-old girl here in Victoria, Ali Thomas. She died of suspected overdose last week. We are thinking of her family and friends and those who worked hard to get her the support that she needed and deserved. It's a tragic loss. I can only imagine that her family and friends are in shock. It's unspeakable that a person so young with so much ahead of them is taken in this way. We are mourning across British Columbia this very hard past year, the loss of over 1,700 people to the overdose crisis. And that someone so young is in our hearts today is something that informs our work every day. Every life, every person matters. Our government is committed to doing more to build up the supports that mean that family and youth and anybody in mental health or addictions crisis gets the help that they need when they need it and where they need it. We have a lot more lives to save, and today we are noting that loss and extending again our condolences to the family and friends of Ali Thomas. This young girl and so many others that we have lost in British Columbia will continue to inform our work as a government and drive us forward to do more and to do better. Today is an announcement of just one of the many commitments that we are making to connect youth to social services and those vital life-saving services that they need. And I'm glad to be here alongside my friend and colleague, Mitzi Dean, the Minister for Children and Families, and also the Executive Director of Foundry, Dr. Steve Mathias. We're also grateful to welcome, and we will hear from in a couple of minutes, Sydney Spence, a valued youth peer advisor, and Christine Harris, a family peer supporter with Foundry BC. It means a lot to be here with this range of people, both in person and virtual, for this announcement today. We're also recognizing Mental Health Week and Child and Youth Mental Health Day. It's a day to reaffirm our commitment and our recognition of our responsibility to serve children and youth. It's a day of awareness and recognition of the work ahead of us, and a day for us to reinforce to young people that we care about their feelings, their well-being, and about their potential. A top priority in our work is to improve wellness for children, youth, and young adults. We want every child to have their best possible start, and we want them to get help as soon as they need it. And we will not stop until we transform the system of care in British Columbia for young people. We are bringing services to meet youth and their families in schools, in communities, in their homes. And just last week, I was here with Minister Dean and Minister Jennifer Whiteside, Minister of Education, to announce a historic investment coming out of Budget 2021 to expand vital services for children and youth across British Columbia to 15 more communities. This is an investment that will add more capacity on the ground where it's needed most and will ensure that when children and families need help, they don't knock on one door after another, losing critical time in a time of critical need. But we know that more work is needed. And as we create that comprehensive system of mental health and substance use care that people in British Columbia need and deserve, we have been working around the clock to build that system, and we're moving forward at full steam with more investments and more supports. And this today is an opportunity to announce another milestone in that work. During this challenging time, greater support is coming to youth and families in every community in British Columbia. bringing technology and mental health and substance use supports together. Today, on Child and Youth Mental Health Day, we are launching the Foundry BC app. From now on, every British Columbian aged 12 to 24 and their caregivers can all access the healthcare, mental health, and substance use services support that they need and deserve. Through this mobile device, computer or phone from exceptional Foundry staff, they are welcoming and supportive and non-judgmental. This is a big win for families and youth who have had no access to these services close to home. And I know that an enormous amount of work has gone into developing this app and bringing us to this moment. It really is a monumental step. There are so many people who have played a vital role in making that Foundry BC app come together today, and all the virtual services that are available through our province. All the Foundry services were designed by and for youth and with youth in mind, making sure that the voices of young people in BC guided the process of this app's development from start to finish. And 3 of those inspiring people are here today to share the announcement. I'm grateful for how our Foundry family has stepped up during the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has exacerbated the mental health and substance use challenges that BC faces. It's been an absolutely critical partner, starting up virtual mental health supports for youth just weeks after the pandemic was declared more than a year ago. And today is a testament to Foundry's hard work, its dedication and drive to help young people and communities throughout British Columbia. So this spring, Foundry Youth showed me how to download the app and showed me how to use it. They set up an appointment with me, a counseling appointment, and then we flipped into that platform so I could see what it felt like face-to-face to be talking with a trusted counselor. I was really impressed with the layout of the Foundry app, how welcoming it was, very much like walking into a physical Foundry center. And it was really quick and really easy to navigate. So I look forward to hearing the stories this morning of the many youth that will be helped, have been helped already, that have been using the app, and we look forward with hope to the many youth that will be served across British Columbia on this new delivery platform. And I am now going to welcome my colleague, Minister Mitzi Dean, to say a few words.
Thank you, Minister. Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to be here in person with my colleague, Minister Malcolmson, on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. Virtually as well, we're here with Steve Mathias, Sydney Spence, and Christine Harris to celebrate the launch of Foundry BC app. Thank you for joining us. As my colleague just said, the pandemic has affected youth in unprecedented ways. In all of my experience in family services, we're now seeing the most toxic drug environment with an unimaginable number of tragedies. It's been crucial for services to adapt so that youth and families can get the help that they need. Though we see their resiliency each and every day, it's never been more important to make sure that young people have access to services when, where, and how they need them. My colleague has outlined a number of the steps that our government has already taken to improve mental health services for young people across our province. And this app that we're launching today will give youth, especially those living in rural and remote areas of our province, the chance to seek and receive help and services on demand. From mental health care, substance use services, primary and sexual health care, youth and family, peer support, and social services, the Foundry offers streamlined and coordinated options for youth and families to get the help and support they need when they ask for it. With in-person services being limited these days, BC's youth and families need flexible options and choices. And this app was made for youth by youth, so it gives them the opportunity to connect with peers for their own support. And it provides the ability to build safe relationships with like-minded individuals that they're comfortable with, making it easier for young people to get the help they need when they need it. This is a really important tool that is going to help youth overcome challenges and get back on the road to wellness. So I say thank you to Foundry BC and to your community partners and to our cross-ministry partners as well for making key supports available to more young people in their time of need. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Dean. I now welcome Steve Mathias, Executive Director of Foundry, to speak about the work that it took to get us to this announcement today. Welcome, Steve.
Both Ministers Malcolm. Causes us to take a moment to just reflect on what that means and the importance of supporting and destigmatizing help seeking during a time of need, moments when young people are struggling to access mental health services. We know as many as 1 in 5 young people in any given year, particularly the teenagers and young adults, will have their struggles, and that has been made and really amplified, but made worse by this pandemic. In many ways, I think it's our young who have sacrificed. They may not be attending school at all at this moment. They have lost employment opportunities. They've certainly lost their freedoms and their ability to travel, ability to see friends. And many of the coping strategies that we've encouraged young people to use during non-pandemic times have been greatly limited, if not eliminated, during the lockdowns that we have seen for young people around not only Canada, but internationally. And so we've been left in many ways to quickly find opportunities to have young people stay connected and to access those services that they would normally access in person, to access those virtually. I have to admit that the app that we're launching today was 5 years in the making. And it was 5 years in the making because we recognized quite a long time ago that we needed to transform the way young people accessed health and social services. This work has been led by an incredibly dedicated group of young people who have worked with a small but mighty organization called Freshworks Studios to design the app that you see today. We've had well over 1,500 young people using our virtual services in this past year. Close to 1,000 have used the app during a soft launch period. And I think that they have found it useful and easy to use and navigate our services. And we're really excited about what the future holds for not only the current state of the app, but all of the additions that we anticipate making in the coming months and years. So I just want to thank again the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Children and Families, also the Ministry of Education for their vision and strategy around youth mental health in this province. We understand that there is a lot of work ahead of us, particularly given the epidemic that we continue to struggle with, the fentanyl crisis, as well as the pandemic. And as we start to come out of the pandemic, we look forward to supporting young people to re-engage in so many of the activities that they look forward to and really making that transition alongside them, using a team of dedicated counselors and peer support workers to be there for them when they need them. And so I encourage young people and their family members to download the app today and to check out the services that we offer in the hopes that we are able to help young people in the upcoming weeks as they reimagine life coming out of the pandemic and really address any needs that they may have, whether it's mental health or substance use or physical health needs, and access our services through the app or through our 11 centers around the province. Thank you, Minister Malcolmson. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. We're now going to turn to Sydney Spence, who's Foundry's youth advisor, to share what the application means to her.
Thank you so much, Minister. I have a lot of lived experience with mental health that's made me very passionate about helping others, particularly youth, who are overcoming some of the same obstacles that I have. So when I heard what Foundry was planning, I jumped at the chance to use my experience for something positive. And now that we're here, this really has felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My favorite part of this process, besides working with the amazing team at Foundry and the other youth committee members, has been seeing some of my ideas come to life. When we got to look at the first draft of the app, it was so exhilarating to see some of my input taking shape right in front of my eyes. This project is doubly important to me, however, because of my job. I'm a dance instructor in a small community called Powell River, and I work with some of the most amazing kids. There are some amazing, amazing kids here in this town, and over the last 6 years that I've worked at the studio, I have made some awesome connections with them. And our world today is full of so much fear and anxiety, more so than ever before. And I am seeing how greatly it is impacting the youth of our province. And so this app is going to give them the easy and accessible access that they need. And it is a need and a help that they deserve. And so I am so proud and so honored to have played even a small part in helping them get it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sydney. And thank you for bringing what you've learned in to help others. And this is a key part of Foundry's work and the design of this app. We're also joined today by Christine.
Okay, so we heard what happens when we allow the freedom of creativity, the freedom of innovation to just thrive without the limitations of profit, the ideas of what I believe, and I'll speak alone on this, it's my opinion, that without the need for corporate greed, that we don't have to have the corporations make big profits. Yes, people do need to go and be able to pay rent. Yes, people do need to be able to travel, go on vacation, and live brilliant and wonderful lives. But we shouldn't have to pay with a literal arm and a leg for our health because it's simply unaffordable. Just some food for thought. Thank you for listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media. Please go to depictions.media for more information, websites, and other links to gather information so that you make your own opinion. And please do contact with us. How can we help? This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.